Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here. You know, we know that the residents of Camp Ashraf watch this. We want to say a couple things to them this morning. We're not operating in a vacuum here. We want to tell them that we're very proud of them and that we are very amazed by their sacrifice and that we want them not to give up hope and to never, 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 never give up. You know, we are frustrated. We speak here this morning with some obvious degree of frustration because, as you've heard, whether it's on the legal merits or on the factual merits, we can't seem to get our State Department to make a decision. A Court of Appeals, the United States Court of Appeals for this circuit, in August of 2010, said a couple of phenomenal things. One thing the court said to the Secretary of State that she had violated the constitutional rights of the MEK, violated the constitutional rights of the MEK, and said, secondly, we've looked at the record. We don't know how you made your factual designation because even the State Department in its pleading said in many cases they had no idea about the credibility of the witnesses and sources that were being used to support this now 14-year-old designation. So they sent it back to the Secretary with a very clear instruction to review and report and decide. And for months, over a year, we have gotten nothing but silence and delay from the State Department. Is reason itself to think that there was a huge vacuum, a huge hole in the Secretary of State's position, which is precisely why we have gotten neither a decision nor a report. And you've heard also some of the people who have become involved in this. You know, I just got my box score here, which I'll go over for a moment. You know, who is saying that this organization is not a terrorist organization? Not a reporter, okay? Not somebody on a reality show, not some anonymous source. I mean, let's just look, and I don't think I've even captured them all, but we've got a former national security advisor to the President of the United States, Attorney General, 2 CIA directors, an NSA director, a DHS secretary, an Assistant Secretary of State for Counterterrorism, a NATO commander, a CENTCOM commander, ambassadors, 2 Marine Corps commandants, a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Do you think for a moment that any of these, will include an FBI director, do you think for a moment any of these people would be saying this group is not a terrorist organization if there was a scant piece of evidence that it was? Let me tell you how else this town works. You know, my colleagues, I have thousands of colleagues who stay in the FBI. Judge McCasey has hundreds of colleagues who are at the Department of Justice. Do you think if there was a scintilla of evidence that this was a terrorist group, we would have all gotten those phone calls from our friends saying, you know, Louis, General, Governor, this is really not something you want to be involved in? We've not heard anything like that. In fact, nobody's heard anything at all except the hollow noise of the State Department. But it's not the certification in a passive sense, and this is the key point. The maintenance of this organization, contrary to all the facts and the law, as you've heard from 2 splendid lawyers, is not just passivity. It is the basis by which we provide a license to kill to the Iranian regime and, unfortunately, to the Prime Minister of Iraq, who is there by the sacrifice of young American women and men. And this license to kill is used on a frequent basis, whether it's the kangaroo courts in Iran arresting, torturing, and killing people, or the atrocities that you saw in this video from April 8th. So we've tried some legal arguments, we've tried some factual arguments. We've gotten nothing from the State Department, either on the record or over the transom or leaked out to the world. And that's because, ladies and gentlemen, honestly and irrefutably, This is not a terrorist organization. There is no evidence of this. And in 1997, when it was put on the list, it was put on the list for political purposes. The Iranian regime held out normalization, quote unquote, with a new moderate president of Iran, which was something, to its credit, a Democratic administration said, we ought to try this, it makes sense. And as the Attorney General said, it made absolutely no sense. They came back in 2004 to a Republican administration, same offer. You'll see less IEDs killing young Americans in Iraq if you maintain this organization on the foreign terrorist organization list. We've done that. There's been a proliferation of devices. So I'm going to try maybe another approach. We tried on the law, we tried on the facts. Let me try another approach here for a moment and see whether this may have some resonance. I give our president a lot of credit for his handling of the Libyan crisis, and I think we should give him credit. However long it took the administration to come to bat, finally, when it was done, and the White House has celebrated publicly what it calls 2 key principles for United States direct intervention in similar situations. And they told us to the New York Times. Principle number 1, America has the responsibility to stop looming genocide. Principle number 2, America will not act alone when the safety of U.S. persons is not directly threatened. So let's ask the administration to apply these 2 principles to the crisis. Well, the United States doesn't have to act alone here. As you've heard, the United Nations, the United Kingdom, the European Union, thousands of parliamentarians, dozens of experts from all over the world have said the same thing, and everybody in this room knows that. It's not necessary to speculate about what the end game is here, what the regime in Tehran wants, and what their ally, al-Maliki, is not just apparently, but is actively conspiring to achieve, which is the elimination and the genocide of the only organized group of resistance to the terror regime in Tehran. And their neighbor and friend, al-Assad, has been killing for 6 months the freedom fighters in Syria. So this is a group that doesn't need any roadmap for us to understand what their objectives are and what the short-term as well as long-term goals will be. The European Union just condemned Iran's Al-Quds military force for giving technical and material support to al-Assad's efforts to crush the courageous uprising against his rule. Their allies, their friends, are the 2 people who most affect the safety and well-being of these 3,400 people. Ironically, it's only the Secretary of State and Khomeini who are arguing today that the MEK belongs on the foreign terrorist organization list. We know that the Iranian regime, acting through its MOIS, actively promotes propaganda in the United States and regularly spews out misinformation and falsities aimed at painting the MEK as a terrorist organization, as a cult organization. You can pick the flavor of the day that is the particular aim of this regime. The MOIS is actively involved in this campaign. So in 1997, I got a call from the Secretary of State, and the complaint was the FBI were fingerprinting the Iranian wrestling teams who were newly invited into the United States. And there was a big outrage at Foggy Bottom why we were fingerprinting the Iranian wrestlers. And we said, well, on the wrestling team, beyond the athletes, there's usually an MOIS agent. It's the wrestler that looks like he's a little bit out of shape. And the reason we take all their fingerprints is this discourages them from using this conveyance to bring in MOIS officers who actively exploit and operate their networks here in the United States. They have been doing that now with respect to MEK, and the response from the State Department to this degree has been negligible. when this group was put on the FTO list in 1997, we saw it for what it was in the FBI, a political determination, none of our business. But from an operational point of view, we didn't assign any resources to look at this organization because we didn't believe there was any factual basis by which the organization could be classified as a terrorist organization. So it is essential that the Secretary of State make a decision. We cannot delay and obfuscate by asking inane questions that have no factual basis or relevance to this determination. If there were any facts, classified or not, that maintain this justification, ladies and gentlemen, we would have heard about them. We would have seen a court filing, even if it had the stereotypical blackouts. Somebody would be leaking something to the Washington Post. Somebody would be before the Congress saying, we can't describe the details, but this is a terrorist organization. We've heard none of that, not in the filings and not in the ether. And the reason is because there is no factual basis. So we would like to perhaps suggest another approach today. The facts haven't worked, the law hasn't worked, so why don't we ask the administration to apply the two principles which it has been celebrating in the media for the last few weeks with respect to Libya. But the FBI interviewed all these people, everybody in Camp Ashraf, and the report card said no. There is nobody here, as best we can determine, who has that tendency, who has that capability. So those are the facts. Those are the facts. And with respect to principle 2, the Secretary doesn't have to act alone here. The President doesn't have to act alone. It can be, unfortunately, the last person aboard the train, but a momentum and a group that includes, as you've heard, the United Kingdom, the European Union, the United Nations. We have a duty to act even if we weren't acting with these other players. But if we apply these two principles, we ought to have a delisting immediately. It should be done this week. And the U.S., more than just the listing, has to take active measures to protect the people of Camp Ashraf. The U.S. has this obligation, and the obligation must be fulfilled. Thank you.